Lucy Freibert's essay, Control and Creativity, The Politics of Risk in Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, written in 1988. In this critical piece, Freibert does more than just analyze the novel. She brings feminist theory into direct dialogue with Offred's personal resistance. Her essay shows how Offred's seemingly passive narration is actually an act of powerful defiance. Through a feminine lens, Freibert demonstrates how Offred's body, voice, and memories become tools of survival and subversion in a world designed to erase her. Overview. In Freibert's essay, she covers sanctified control, complicit silence, voices as liberation, feminism in fragments, and a double-edged critique in Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. Freibert argues that Gilead uses a combination of religious and militaristic rituals to reinforce patriarchal power, but she also highlights the insidiousness of complicity, how women participate in their own subjugation, sometimes out of fear, other times out of survival. A major point Freibert makes is that Offred carves out agency by not fighting with weapons, but through storytelling, bodily awareness, and her voice. She links this to French feminist thinkers like Hélène Cixous and Iguiret, especially the concept of richer feminine or feminine writing. According to Freibert, Atwood critiques both patriarchy and the academics world's tendency to misinterpret women's voices, especially through the lens of the novel's historical notes ending. Women's pravaganzas are for group weddings. Men's are for military victories. Freibert uses this line to show how Gilead collapses religion and warfare into a single system of control. The fact that women's religious ceremonies are focused on marriage, essentially legalizing their reproductive function, while men are for battle victories, show a stark difference of purpose. Women are given roles that center around their biological ability to reproduce, while men are honored for conquests. Freibert's analysis helps us see that Gilead transforms women into prizes to be awarded and not people to be respected. I agree with her take. It reveals how rituals serve to normalize gender oppression, and also reflects how deeply theocratic ideology in Gilead masks brutal control under the guise of divine will. At the hangings, each handmaid must touch the rope in assent to the murderers. This moment in the novel is chilling. Handmaids are asked to symbolically consent to execution. Freibert rightfully points out how horrifying this is, but she also stresses its brilliance from a psychological perspective. Gilead forces women to act out their own complicity, making them perform agreement with the system. By doing so, it erodes their ability to imagine rebellion. I think this is a brilliant insight. Freibert doesn't let us off the hook by treating handmaids solely as victims. She shows that the regime depends on their cooperation. This idea connects the real-world systems of oppression where people are made to internalize the rules that harm them, to the point that resistance seems unnatural. Offred, once freed, threatens the system by telling her tale. Freibert emphasizes that narration itself is revolutionary. In Gilead, where women are denied literacy and storytelling, Offred's ability to reflect, remember, and speak becomes a radical act. This quote shows how powerful memory and language can be. I strongly agree with Freibert here. Offred's tale doesn't just preserve her past, it creates a space where she can make meaning and resist erasure. Her story breaks the silence the regime tries to enforce. Atwood is showing that voice, especially a woman's voice, is inherently political when the state tries. She sets Offred, body and voice, against the body politic. This quote has a fascinating double meaning, and Freibert unpacks it well. On one hand, it positions Offred's individual body in opposition to Gilead's political structure. On the other hand, it's a wordplay on how her physical body is politicized. Her body is used by the state as a reproductive vessel, but through desire, awareness, and eventually love, Offred starts reclaiming it. Freibert connects this to Iguiret's idea of women as fluid, as desiring, as resisting containment. Offred's body, once colonized by Gilead, becomes hers again, not through violence, but through reclaiming agency in her relationships, especially with Nick. This re-embodiment parallels her narrative voice taking shape. She looks like a nun, sleeps in a cell-like room, converses in formulaic phrases. Freibert draws attention to the way Atwood uses imagery associated with religious institutions, cells, robes, silence, to make Gilead's control feel sacred and absolute. But it's also satire. The uniformity and asceticism are not about devotion, they're about control. Offred's room is stripped of everything that makes the space personal. She's not allowed mirrors, pens, or even privacy. I agree with Freibert's interpretation that this symbolism critiques how religion can be twisted into a tool of erasure. Atwood exaggerates this to make the point that piety can become oppression when turned into law. The pen between my fingers is sensuous, alive almost. I can feel its power. This quote is about more than writing. It's about reclaiming agency. Freibert calls this a breakthrough moment for Offred, and I agree. Holding this pen is intimate and electric, not because of what it is, but because of what it allows. Voice, authorship, and control. It's a symbol of freedom in a world that has criminalized literacy for women. This sensuality of the pen links directly to the idea of erector feminine, writing from the body. Freibert sees this as Offred reconnecting to herself, and I'd add that it's one of the first times she experiences desire not dictated by the regime. It's a quiet rebellion. Just holding a pen becomes revolutionary. Offred manipulates him to get the hand lotion and magazines. Here, Freibert explores Offred's interactions with the commander, how she manipulates him to get lotion, books, or even the smallest pleasures. Freibert argues this kind of bargaining is survival, and I agree. Offred learns to use the tools available to her, charm, wit, and storytelling. These small victories accumulate into a larger sense of agency for her. Some critics have dismissed Offred for not being more active, but Freibert defends her here, showing how even calculated compliance can be resistance when choice is limited. In a world where saying no can be deadly, saying yes with strategic intent is a form. Although Offred's tapes may have helped bring about the demise of Gilead, they do not bring about Atwood's ideal society. This is one of Freibert's most scathing critiques, directed not at Gilead, but at us. The historical notes section shows a future that has archived Offred's story but stripped it of emotion. The scholars joke, speculate, and theorize, reducing her trauma to data. Freibert uses this to critique how even academia, supposedly progressive, can fail women by ignoring lived experience. I completely agree with this reading. The notes are meant to unsettle us. After all of Offred's courage to tell her story, we end on a scene of cold detachment. It's a warning. Preserving women's voices is not enough. We have to honor them. Final takeaways. The body is not destiny. Offred reclaims herself through language. Freibert reminds us that even in a world obsessed with controlling women's bodies, selfhood is still possible. Offred resists the notion that her identity is tied solely to her reproductive role by using words, by composing herself. Resistance is most powerful when embodied in a story. Storytelling is not passive in this novel. Freibert's essay shows how Offred's narrative is a form of action. Every time she tells her truth, messy, scared, hopeful, she resists being erased. Rituals normalize violence. Awareness and voice break the cycle. The rituals in Gilead hide brutality behind ceremony. Freibert argues that Offred's awareness and her refusal to internalize those lies is what allows her to break free from this mentality, if not physically. Atwood's satire is timeless, questioning power even in progress. Freibert's final point is that Atwood doesn't only target Gilead. The historical notes show us that even in the future, the systems that undermine women's voices remain. It's a warning about the fragility of progress.